Test Yourself for a War Job. That is the name of the book that we're looking at today. This was printed in 1943, and although it says war job here, this is not a military book. This was printed during World War II, and its purpose was to match civilians up with jobs in the private sector that were in demand during World War II. It's really interesting to flip through this book and hear kind of what was going on at the time. Even just in the introduction here, it's talking about the importance of wartime manufacturing and how so much of the workforce has been called into the service, that people from all walks of life are now moving into new roles in factories and as machine operators and all types of in-demand jobs. And that's what this booklet was for, to help people find jobs that they may not have considered before that were in high demand during World War II. The introduction also makes mention of the many women that were entering the workforce at this time, taking over positions previously filled by men who had gone off and joined the service. They played a very important role in the war effort. You're watching this video on my second channel called More War Wisdom, so if you're not already subscribed here, make sure to do that. I post a lot of fun tidbits that don't make it to my main channel on here, so go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss out. I don't know how good any of these tests in here will be at actually measuring my skills or matching me with a wartime occupation, but I'm willing to give them a try and find out. Why don't we read kind of the summary of what these tests are designed to do from the back of the booklet here. These tests will help you find your place in war industry. They'll tell you what to think of yourself. There are three kinds. They are first, tests which presuppose no previous training, aim to measure your native dexterity. These are called aptitude tests. Second, tests which draw on general knowledge, measuring your ability to adjust to a new situation. These are common sense tests. And third, tests which measure your knowledge of mechanical matters. It may be more than you realize. These are achievement tests. It goes on to say a high score in 2 out of 3 of these means you will do well in a technical job. High in 1 and low on 2 and 3 means you'll do well on the production line. Low on 1 and high on 2 and 3 means you'd be weak in the shop but good in the office. I'm curious to see how some of the tests in this booklet compare to the tests the Army was using at the time, like the Army General Classification Test. That was the test that was used to assign jobs to soldiers, so soldiers who scored well on that test were given more technically advanced and leadership roles. I just took that test myself for a video on my main channel, World War Wisdom. Definitely check that out if you haven't seen it yet. But I think that test will serve as a good benchmark for some of the tests in here. I have already flipped through this booklet and chosen out the tests that I'd like to complete today. That's because I made my own answer sheets for those tests, at least most of them. I'd like to avoid writing in this original booklet. It's made it 83 years already and it's in great shape for its age. I'd like to avoid marking it up. I'd rather just write on a separate piece of paper. So I went through, I chose 2 tests from each of those 3 sections. Remember, the sections were aptitude, common sense, and knowledge tests. So that's 6 tests total. Now these ones are each pretty short, so I don't think that should take too long. I'll go through each of those tests, record my answers on my answer sheets, and then assign myself a score that we can use to see kind of in general which jobs I would qualify for. I expect to come away from this knowing if I should apply for a technical wartime job, one on the production line, or an office job. This booklet includes all of the answer keys and everything like that, of course, and it also includes tables that are used to convert your score to a percentile. If you were curious, this book was printed by the Houghton Mifflin Company in Boston, and that's a company that still makes a lot of textbooks today. Alright, let's get right into the first test here and see what we're working with. The first test we'll start out with here is called the dual operation test. It basically has 2 little tracks that you trace with your pencil, and then you score yourself on if you make any mistakes and on how long it takes you to trace all of these patterns here. It's a very interesting concept for a test. I don't know how scientifically viable that is, but we'll give it a try and see how it goes. I didn't make a separate answer sheet for this, so what I'm going to do is cover this page in plastic wrap and then write on it with a marker so I can avoid writing on the page and still complete the test as it was meant to be done. Could I have simply copied these pages? Probably, but where's the fun in that? Come on. All right, here goes the dual operations test. Definitely being a little sloppy with some of these. Let's see if we can bring it home on the last couple. Done. We'll say 53 seconds there. That was interesting. It was pretty tough to draw within the lines here consistently, not just because I was doing two things at once, but because I was trying to hold the marker and the book wasn't laid completely flat. But I think I got a good sense of what this test was like and what it's trying to measure here. So let's go ahead and add up my score. First, we need to count up all of the errors I made anytime I left those kind of borders there with the line that I was drawing. 6 errors plus my time, which was 53 seconds. So that gives us 59 as the score. I'll fill that in on the score sheet that I made. Now let's see what percentile that corresponds to. Maybe I should have taken a better picture of that while it was still on here, but I think you guys get the point. That would explain a lot. I'm supposed to use the time in minutes, not seconds. I thought I got a terrible score. I was like, my score isn't even on the chart. Okay, so 6 errors plus 1 minute instead of writing it down in seconds. That would be a score of 7, which is the 99th percentile. Maybe I was a little too lenient with my judging. It was kind of hard to see what was in the lines, but we'll take it. 99th. All right, next up is the copying designs test. I do have an answer sheet made up for this one. Basically for this one, it shows you a little design made up of straight lines and you have to map that onto a grid. It looks pretty simple, but I think it'll be easy to get off by like one grid dot and mess up the whole thing, so we'll see how it goes. Again here, it's a race against the clock, so let's go ahead and get started. All right, 8.5 minutes. That one I thought was pretty easy. It did take some thinking, and there were a couple times I had to erase what I did and start over if I realized I was kind of off the grid, but let's see how I scored. Out of the 20 questions, I got one wrong. It was number 18 here, and I drew the correct pattern, just shifted to the left by 1 square, so my bad. It says here number of errors, so 1, multiplied by the time it took. I was just under 8.5 minutes, so that would round down to 8 minutes, giving me a score of 1 times 8, which is 8. Okay, it says a score of 8 is 90th percentile, so that's very good. That was the last of the aptitude tests that I'll be doing, so that means my average for that category was 94.5%. We'll compare that to the other sections at the end, but that's definitely above average, so I'm happy with that. Although I don't exactly know what these tests are telling me or how conclusive these really are, but let's power through. This is exciting. We're moving on to some common sense tests. Okay, the first of the so-called common sense tests is an arithmetic test. It has a series of math problems here. It says I will be given 15 minutes to do as many problems as I can. So I'm guessing I probably won't be able to finish all of these. All right, here we go. I definitely did not finish all of them. There were a lot of tricky problems there. It definitely took up some of my time having to copy the problems onto a separate piece of paper. Maybe if I didn't have to do that, I would have finished this last problem I was working on, but I don't think that'll make a huge difference. Let's see how many of those I got right. It's not looking good so far. Ouch. Well, I did not do so hot. I only got 7 out of the 20 questions correct. That was a pretty short amount of time to do all of those problems, and there were 4 of them that I missed. Most of them, it was a small mistake. I was off by like 1 digit. I think if I would have gone back and checked my answers, I would have caught that, but I didn't have the time to, so I got those ones wrong. Well, it looks like a score of 7 is in the 25th percentile. So that's pretty bad. That means that only 25% of people did worse than me on that one. And I'm a mechanical engineer, so I'm pretty okay at math usually. I mean, I think that's a pretty high bar though. Even if I got all of those ones right that I marked as wrong, I would still only have a score of 11, which would be below the 50th percentile. So that's a hard test right there. I never was great at doing math problems under time limits though. I remember when they used to give us those like mad minute things in elementary school where you had to see how many math problems you can solve in a minute. It was like the most stressful thing of my life. I still have nightmares about those. With a less than stellar score on that one, let's move on to the next common sense test, which is called the test of mechanical comprehension. I don't really know what to expect here, but there's no time limit, so let's just get started and see how it goes. That was something. Let me show you guys some of the problems that they had in here. I didn't really give you examples on the last one since it was just math and tracing lines and stuff like that, but this one I think it'll be helpful to see the pictures and see what they were asking, because some of these were pretty confusing. I couldn't even figure out what the diagrams were trying to ask. 24 through 27 reference these diagrams of drill bits, and I thought they were pretty confusing. I had to look at the enlarged view here of the two drill points for a while before I even figured out what the difference was. It looks like one is just ground so that the tip is slightly out of center. So then for the question, which of the two drills shown is ground correctly, I put the one that was in center, which is E. Then it asks, do they drill in direction G or H? We can see those directions labeled here. We want to go with that kind of corkscrew direction, so I put G for that one. And then this I thought was really confusing. It says which drill was used to make hole A and which was used to make hole B. The two drills look to be equal diameter to me. I guess it's referencing the fact that the tip on one of them is slightly out of center, which can cause a bigger hole. So I said that that one made the bigger hole A, and the one that was perfectly lined up made hole B. Let's check the answers and see if I was right about that. I was right about those answers we just reviewed, but I did get 2 wrong. I still got 25 out of 27 correct though. It says that 25 is the 99th percentile, so kind of making up for my poor score on the arithmetic test. Let's average out my percentages for the common sense tests. I averaged about 62% for that section, which is still above the average of 50%, but it's not nearly as good as that first section. So let's see how we do on the mechanical knowledge. The first test I'll do in this section is called the same different test. This shows 2 words and I have to say if they mean the same thing or if they mean different things. So let's try this out. Well, that one didn't take very long, but probably because I just guessed on a bunch of them. I don't know what a philister is, to be honest. Although, I don't know how fit for the job this makes you. Like, I think being able to use any of these items in real life would say more about your knowledge. I think maybe even a very skilled machinist might not be super familiar with some of these terms. So, let's check my answers and see how I did. Well, I'm getting a lot wrong. Wow, I got 12 wrong out of 35 questions. Let's check out some of the ones that I missed. Okay, I don't know what the hell's going on here. Let's look at 19, for example. It says stress and strain. Now, I put that those are 2 different things because they are. They're 2 different measurable values with different equations for how you calculate them. It said that they were the same, which I guess, I mean, stress and strain are definitely similar, and we might use them colloquially to be like, oh, that object is under a lot of stress or it's under a lot of strain. But technically speaking, they mean 2 different things, and this is a technical test here that's supposed to be gauging my mechanical knowledge. You think that somebody with mechanical knowledge would know that there's a difference between stress or strain, but the book says they're the same, so I don't know. I'm definitely writing to the publisher about that. I'm sure Houghton Mifflin is going to go back and revise their 83-year-old test booklet. Mr. Mifflin himself will hear about this. Go ahead and measure the strain of something in pounds per square inch. I dare ya. I got 23 right, at least according to this answer key that they provided, so that puts me in the 60th percentile, still above average, so I guess I can't complain too much about that. Okay, now we're moving on to the next test, which is the test of mechanical measurement. This test shows photos of things being measured by scales and micrometers, and I'm supposed to write down the measurements shown on the device. No time limit, so let's get into it. Again, I'll show you some examples afterwards. Alright, I think I understood what was going on there. Let's pull up the answer key and see how I did. It says here that I got 2 wrong. Let's see what they were. Okay, first off here is number 2. I gotta be honest, I think the answer key is wrong about this one. It clearly shows here that it's lined up with 13 on the dial. So if I have 0.2 here, and then I have 25 thousandths, which is shown by that first tick mark, and I add 13 thousandths, that would give me 0.238. The answer key says 0.239. What is going on with this book? Mr. Mifflin is going to hear about this. I mean, what if somebody decided not to go into a career in a machine shop because they got that question wrong? I mean, I don't care. There's no stakes for me, but that's kind of crazy that they have these mistakes in there. I'm gonna mark myself correct for that one that I had right and they had wrong. Houghton Mifflin, more like Houghton dare you. Oh, they got me making terrible puns here. Okay. What percentile is this? This says that a 9 corresponds to the 80th percentile, and that brings my average percentage for the mechanical knowledge section to 70th percentile. Not as good as the aptitude section, but that's not too surprising. The aptitude tests were really easy. I think a kindergartner could have done a lot of those. I figured I would have done better on the mechanical knowledge section, considering I'm a mechanical engineer, but hey, some of this stuff was outdated. It referenced a lot of specific tools and stuff I wasn't familiar with, so I think that's a fine score. Okay, now let's interpret these percentiles to see what type of war job I'm cut out for. I scored the highest in the aptitude and mechanical knowledge sections. So according to the booklet, if I score high on the first and third sections, that means I would do well in a mechanical or technical job. And technically, I got above average in all of those categories, even the common sense one. It is funny to me though that I did the worst in the common sense section. So overall, how effective is this booklet at telling you which jobs you would realistically be good at in the real world? I don't know. I guess that's up to interpretation. Maybe there are some people that could be helped on this, but I don't really know that any of those tests realistically told me anything about myself that I didn't already know. I feel that would be the same for most people who took this. Like, if you know you're good at math, you'll probably do well in that section. If you know that you worked in a machine shop and are really familiar with the tools, you probably don't need a test to tell you that. With that said, maybe this book was helpful in matching some people with jobs. It's hard to say. This was very different than the Army General Classification test. I kind of expected them to be a little bit more similar, but there really wasn't much overlap. I think some of the questions in here, like in the aptitude section where I was kind of copying designs, they reminded me of the block counting questions that are included on the General Classification test. You kind of had to use some thinking and visualize something where you can't see it. But the rest of the tests, even the math, wasn't very similar to the Army General Classification test. I thought the math questions on the Army test were a lot easier than these ones, but those were a lot more logic and reasoning based. A lot of the questions on the Army test required you to like maybe make a system of equations to represent a scenario and find a variable, or multiply different percentages to calculate a percentage of a number or something like that. In this booklet, however, that was not the case. It was just strict arithmetic, and this one isn't multiple choice either, so if you were off by just a tiny bit, well, you just got that one wrong. To be fair though, the stakes were a lot lower with this test. This is something you would do at home for your own sake. It's not like the Army test where your score could have meant the difference between life or death, because a good score on that Army test could have saved you from combat duties. Well guys, this was a lot of fun. I'm gonna go use this new knowledge that I just gained about myself to go apply for a bunch of technical wartime production jobs. Maybe they'll let me make Sherman tanks in Lima, Ohio, or something like that. Again, if you haven't already seen my video where I take the Army categorization test from World War II, definitely check that one out. It's a really fun video, and I've linked a PDF in the description of that video so you can take the test as well. I have not yet found a PDF version of this booklet. I guess I could meticulously scan this one, but after seeing how lackluster some of the tests were, I don't really feel inclined to do that. With that said, guys, thank you so much for watching. Remember to subscribe to More War Wisdom, my second channel where you're watching this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.